Hey everybody, how's it going? It is I, Lego Zach here. So this is part 2 of my room tour. The first part ran almost 2.5 hours long. Let's try to keep this one a little bit shorter. And just show you the things I didn't show you, either on my shelf or various other locations in my room. Okay, so we're going to start with the bottom half of the shelf, which contains all my VHS tapes, or most of them. You'll see the others in a second. But first, got this one in the mail after the video was made, but wanted to review Brawl in Cell Block 99, which is Vince Vaughn's best movie, and in my opinion, one of the most gory, non-horror films I've ever seen. Incredibly intense, not for the faint of heart, but a really good movie nonetheless. So, recommend checking it out if you're, not squeamish. But we'll start with VHS tapes. With the Alien Trilogy box set. I've already given my opinion on all these movies. Most of these movies on the VHS shelf I've already talked about, but we'll, just highlight them anyways. Next is Army of Darkness, which we actually didn't talk about in the first video. This is the third movie in the Evil Dead trilogy before it got rebooted. This one is more of a fish out of water time travel story. Not as good as the second one, in my opinion, still better than the first one though. So really only the second and third one are required viewing if you want to understand the story. The first one is completely optional. Next is Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, which is a horror parody. It's intentionally bad. It's intentionally trying to parody early sci-fi horror movies, and in my opinion does a really good, fun job of it. Next is Beast from 20,000 Fathom. Again, fantastic Harryhausen movie. Beetlejuice. Big Trouble in Little China. Next is ones that we hadn't talked about yet. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bogus Journey. In my opinion, I really like Bogus Journey more than Excellent Adventure. And then the third one is completely skippable. This is a duology, this is not a trilogy in my opinion. The second one completely summarizes the movie at its best. The third one should never have been made. It was a fun project, but should not have gone anywhere. Next is Blade. We talked about that. Here's a movie we didn't talk about. Blade Runner. With Harrison Ford, the original one. I think this is an incredibly overhyped movie. Everybody talks about how heady and deep this movie is. I really think that it is the equivalent of Citizen Kane for sci-fi. It is trying to be smart and trying to say something, but ultimately fails, and is really only an icon piece for like movie buffs or movie critics, people who think that their opinions on movies are better than the common people. I think that this movie is incredibly boring and bloated. The Blair Witch Project, which is one of the first found footage type movies. I don't love this movie. It's iconic horror for sure, but too much meandering, not enough actually story building or anything. I get that the entire hype around this movie was people thought it was real or real found footage, but living into today that we do with paranormal activity and things, I think that this movie is just outdated at this point. Next we have the original Blob with Steve McQueen. I think that this is one of the all-time great, early sci-fi movies. Just fantastically done. Special effects are incredible. Highly recommend this one. Haven't seen the remake from the 80s, I think, but I love this one. The Brain That Wouldn't Die. One of those often forgot early sci-fi movies, and for good reason. It kind of blends in with all of them that ever existed. This was just one of the first early sci-fi movies I saw, so it has a somewhat special place in my heart. Next is Candyman, which is a fantastic political statement piece, but also horror movie. I think the character of Candyman and the story behind it is wonderful. The second and third one are terrible, and quite frankly, I didn't even like the modern remake sequel, but this first one is a masterpiece. Next is Carrie. This is a movie that's been made, remade, and sequelized several times, but none of them have stood close to the original. It is just one of those classic horror movies. Not one of my top tier, but still a really solid one. So this one's weird. This is a movie that I, for some reason, attached to as a child. Chucko the Circus Clown. Back in whenever I was very, very small, 2, 3 years old, I'd go to the public library and rent a VHS tape just like this one. I purchased this one later in my adult life for nostalgia. But it is essentially Chucko the birthday clown doing clown things, making balloon animals, playing with a woman dressed as a cake. There's a guy dressed as an ape, and he does like birthday magic and stuff. It is a children's movie. I've only watched once in my adult life. It does not hold up at all. I don't understand why I loved it so much, but just a true gem of nostalgia for me personally. Next is Clockwork Orange. Next is The Craft. The Craft I really enjoy. It reminds me a lot of Charmed, just as a movie instead of a TV show. And I know that they remade it or sequelized it recently. That one's not good, but this original one is, as a teenager, it's very fun. Now, more grown, it is less enjoyable. But if you can put yourself in these girls' shoes, or at least at their age frame, it's a lot more fun to watch. Next is The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Talked about how much I just love the Gill Man. A movie we haven't talked about yet is Creepshow. I think that this first movie is nearly perfect as far as horror anthology goes. The second one is fine, not great. It's a solid mid-tier. And the third one is awful and should not have been made. Have not seen the TV show, really would like to, but the original that it's all based on, fantastic, nearly perfect movie. Next is The Crow, which I know is several of my friends' just favorite movie of all time. I personally just love it, of course. It's not one of my absolute favorites, but it is still a really good quasi-superhero gothic action movie. Next is the original The Day the Earth Stood Still. I personally really like this movie. I think it brings classic sci-fi into what is almost what we see as sci-fi today. It is the predecessor to all that. It is the reason why we have such good sci-fi movies today. Really solid film. Next is Day of the Triffids. If you're not familiar, it is plants that slowly start taking over the world through removing humans and replacing them. It's a solid B-tier movie. but still a good classic sci-fi watch. Talked about how much I love Dead Alive. Dead Alive is here. Next is, a Tarantino that we didn't talk about, Dusk Till Dawn. Very early George Clooney. It is probably, it's somewhere in the middle as far as Quentin Tarantino movies go. Not one of the best, not one of the worst. Once you start getting into the third act, it's higher, but the first hour is pretty slow going. But once you get into the action, very solid movie. Next is Evil Dead 1 and 2. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. But next we have Final Destination, which is a really good franchise. It's, not great. Definitely has its 90s era flaws, like all 90s horror movies do. But I think it's still a really solid entry, and especially some of the specific kills in it are very good. But overall, the franchise is meh. Next is Forbidden Planet, which is probably the pinnacle of early sci-fi. Robbie the Robot is so iconic at this point. Can't get enough of this movie and its influence that it's had in things like Flash Gordon and future sci-fi movies. Next is the original Boris Karloff Frankenstein. Oh, here's a good gem. So, Freaks. I believe this is a 30s, like a 1930s movie, 1940s, but it's about a freak show. And all of the actors in it are actual freaks. They are, midgets. They are people with no legs, only a torso and arms. There's a bearded lady and things like that. And if you've seen American Horror Story Freak Show season, that is what that season is based on, is this movie. And the tagline for the movie is maybe the normal people are the freaks. Maybe the freaks aren't the freaks, or something like that. But it turns out to be like a murder mystery where the normal people start killing the freaks, and it's very good. Highly recommend it. Kind of an underrated horror movie, but very important. Next is Freddy vs. Jason. Next is Friday the 13th. And I would have more of the Friday the 13th series, but for some reason each one of these tapes is like $20 or more. So I just stuck with the first one for its iconicism. Doesn't even have Jason Voorhees in it, but had to at least get the first one. Next we have a pretty expensive one. So this is the original Gamera movie, sealed, and it's a Japanese import because it's backwards. Very expensive tape. This tape is probably $200-300 because it's sealed. It's not sealed very well. It's, pretty tattered at the bottom, has stickers and stuff, but an incredibly expensive tape. And then I've got a bunch of other Gamera movies that I just haven't seen, but I picked up on eBay for very cheap as a collection. Show all those to you. I can't even pronounce half the monster names in this one. Now this is one of my most least favorite tapes of all time because the spine is upside down, so the tape has to sit upside down on my shelf so the spine lines up with all the others. But I've got all the Gamera movies that were released on VHS, I think except for the second one. And then this was the last Gamera movie released on VHS, Guardians of the Universe. Gremlins. Next is Halloween 1 and 2. Oh, 2 is sealed. Ooh, that's probably worth a good 20 bucks. But unfortunately missing the first one. So I'm on the hunt for that one. Next is Hannibal. Then we have the first 3 Hellraiser movies. Hellraiser is one of those really iconic franchises, but I just never got super into it. I think the first one's solid, and then after that, it is just an immediate downhill spiral to where I think they're on like 10 or 12 movies now, and the most recent ones are just scraping the bottom of the barrel as even barely watchable movies, but the original is really strong in concept and execution. This next one is The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy box set, which includes the actual book. That's a 2-tape collection with the book in the middle. Scoot back over to the other side. Next we have House of a Thousand Corpses. Of course, like I've said, my favorite Rob Zombie movie. I think that we talked about the reason why the remake of House on Haunted Hill is one of my favorites. It was the first horror movie I ever saw. Definitely not a great movie, but just has a nostalgic place in my heart. We got Ice Cream Man with his grenadine treats. We got Jaws, which I don't love. I understand it is the first blockbuster that ever came out. And it definitely has its place, but it's one of those movies I'll catch on if it's on like TV or something, but I'll never sit down and be like, I'm going to watch Jaws. It's just... next is Jeepers Creepers 1 and 2, which are fun. They're fun movies with a fun villain. Tusk is more interesting, has the same main actor in it. Go watch Tusk. It's weird, and in my opinion, better than Jeepers Creepers. Next is the original King Kong with Fay Wray. Got Leprechaun here. And I believe in the first video, I said that Jennifer Aniston's first appearance was in Critters 1. I meant Leprechaun 1. So, you know, do with that information what you will. A fine franchise. My favorite's actually Leprechaun in Space or Leprechaun in the Hood. I think once they start leaning into the silliness a bit more, the franchise gets better. Little Shop of Horrors. Manhunter. The predecessor to Silence of the Lambs. Then I got the Mr. Bean collection. Every Mr. Bean released, I have it on DVD, also have it on VHS. He's one of my favorite, just like, physical comedy comedians. Not going to show you each one of those, but I got the full collection there. Next is Nightbreed, which is a real weird one. Real interesting and weird. Great makeup and special effect design. It tries to be a much deeper story than it has room to actually effectively tell, but it is still a really cool movie. It gives me Lost Boys vibes, but just check it out for the creature design and makeup alone. Just very impressive with that. Night of the Comet, which we did a review here on the channel. A really overlooked sci-fi classic, in my opinion. I think this movie is fantastic. Next we got the entire Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Again, won't show you all of them, but I do have them all. Night of the Living Dead. I understand why it is an iconic movie, but it is not a great movie to rewatch. I really like the second one. I forget which one it is. The one where they're in the mall. That's the best one in the entire franchise, in my opinion. The first one It's important to the horror franchise. It is the first zombie movie. It is the first. Um, it gives us the actual depiction of zombies for the first time ever. Um, but it is not super good on the rewatch, you know. Next is the only good Predator movie, in my opinion, Predator 2. I know I'm going to get some flack for, you know, saying that the Schwarzenegger one is not a great one. I just don't care for it as much. I think the second one is a lot more interesting and fun. Can't have classic horror without Psycho, Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece and magnum opus. This and The Birds are incredibly important horror movies as far as horror history goes. But it's a solid movie, but more important as a historical piece than anything. Of course, I gotta have my second favorite movie of all time on VHS, Pulp Fiction. Here's one that I haven't seen, Pumpkinhead. It's one of those horror movie monsters that you hear a lot about, just have not watched it yet. Next we got Red Dragon, the remake of Manhunter. The second Creature of the Black Lagoon movie, Return of the Creature. Not as good as the first, but still a solid entry. Next is RoboCop. I like this better than I like the first Terminator. I think that this one adds a much more interesting human element. Obviously, the Terminator is fully robot. This RoboCop is only half robot. But I think that it really helps because of the human element in RoboCop. And it's also it gets that hard R a little bit better. I don't believe that we talked about this one in the first video, but Rocky Horror Picture Show holds a significant place in my life. During college, I would watch this movie with friends, and we would, shout the responses at the screen. We would, dance around the room, sing the songs. Have very fond memories of this one, especially from college. But a really fun movie. Not great, but it is very fun, and it's a musical. So if you like musicals, check that one out. Next is Seven. Then The Shining. Then Silence of the Lambs. SLC Punk. Then we got Spawn, which is my favorite comic book character of all time. I love Spawn as a character. This movie frustrates me because it's so close to being good, but again, it being a 90s movie, leaning really heavily into CG that they can't quite use yet, holds this movie back dramatically. But the plot and acting in this movie is phenomenal. Some people give Leguizamo a hard time about playing the clown in this movie. I think he does a really good job. That's how I canonize the clown in my head, as I read him in Leguizamo's voice. So I think this movie is really good. Unfortunately, just held back with the technology from the time. Next is Tarantula, just another giant monster movie, very similar to Them, with giant ants, but this time it's a giant tarantula. Very similar, though. Terror Vision is probably the most expensive single VHS tape I have. This one's about $120, but in my opinion, one of the best unknown horror movies, horror comedy, I should say. But try to find a place to watch this. This is such a fun watch. Next is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 and 2. What I love about the second one is the Breakfast Club ripoff from the poster. Next is John Carpenter's The Thing, which I don't think I spoke on this on the first video, but this is actually a remake of a very old sci-fi movie called A Thing from Another World, I believe, which carries the same story roughly, but this one just does it so much better in both storytelling and special effects. Next is 13 Ghosts, my favorite Matthew Lillard movie. Next is Trainspotting. Next is Pink Floyd's The Wall, which very similar to the Beatles' Yellow Submarine. This movie is, several songs tied together with a loose story plot, some animated elements, mostly, live action. But if you like Pink Floyd, highly recommend it. If you like musicals, also can recommend it. And speaking of which, next is the Beatles' Yellow Submarine in a real nice slipcase like that. And last is an Angora fur collection box of Ed Wood movies. If you are not familiar with Ed Wood, he is one of those directors who really wanted to make a movie but was bad at it. Plan 9 from Outer Space is his most famous. It is the epitome of, you see the string whenever, a spaceship is flying by. Very low budget, but he was known for using Bela Lugosi in his movies, who was currently dying of, opium drug use, but, needed money to fuel his opium addiction, so became friends with Ed Wood and created really terrible sci-fi movies. But they're fun, and this is a nice little collective box and an Angora fur box. So I just want to show you what's on the bottom shelf very quickly. I collect various colored VHS tapes, trying to make a rainbow, 2 of each. Missing a few. There's a couple that I only have 1 of, like the 2 different variations of red. I need another gray, I need purple and pink. Then next to it I have some Pokemon Mega Constructs. They're almost like Lego, but these are officially licensed by Pokemon, and are expensive now, but I bought them whenever they first came out. And then below that I have an open box of Spawn trading cards, a sealed box of Versus System DC cards, and then Cats the Musical on VHS tape in a giant clamshell that doesn't fit on my shelf. And we're not going to go too much into detail about this shelf, but this is every single Godzilla movie ever released on VHS tape. On one shelf, properly displayed, artwork facing out, just like a Blockbuster or something. I'm only going to highlight a few, but this is all of them released on VHS. This is actually a sealed Japanese copy. It is, I think, a bootleg, but it is still a pricey thing. It is completely factory sealed, straight from the 80s. It's probably a $100 VHS tape. Then these are all bootleg Japanese imports of extended universe Godzilla movies that don't directly tie to Godzilla, except for these last 2. That's movies like Frankenstein versus Baragon, or Atragon, or another Gamera, but this one's not sealed, so I can actually watch it. And then at the very bottom, some more extended universe Godzilla movies. We got Varan, Rodan, Mothra, and then the Mothra sequels. So we're not going to go over every book that I have, but I'm going to show you some of the highlights or the more interesting ones. A lot of it is just books that I use either for reference or have read, really enjoyed, but I'll point out some of the highlights. So this is my copy of Dante's Inferno. Unfortunately missing the slipcover, but it is, I think, a 1950s edition. It's a pretty rare edition of it, but just this is my copy of Dante's Inferno that I read. Next is The Gorillas, Rise of the Ogre. Again, unfortunately missing the slipcover, but a very expensive book. This was in print for a very limited time. And I actually purchased it from a friend who bought it new off of the shelf. But it goes into the Gorillaz mythology, song lyrics, breakdown of all the characters, extra lore, what the videos mean. It is a Gorillaz compendium for the first 2 or 3 albums, I think. But just a really special book to me because I love the Gorillaz. Here is the Pokemon Gold and Silver walkthrough guide. Not something I had as a child, but found at a thrift store for very cheap and just thought it was a cool piece. I've kept every single Speckle notebook journal that I've ever done in school. Some of them are English assignments, some of them I've written in my thoughts, some of them have pictures that I drew when I was in the 5th grade. And I appreciate that I've kept all these years. Just to give you an example, I guess. This is one of my notebooks that I kept whenever I was, I think this is 3rd grade. I was drawing Pokemon. I was, cutting out pictures of animals from magazines. Just, you name it. All the pages are all stuck together. But just a fun nostalgia thing. And I've got 4, 5, 6 of those notebooks. Next is almost a pamphlet of A Pickle for the Knowing Ones by Timothy Dexter. It is like, I think, 10 pages long, but it is the babblings of an insane person, literally. And he didn't know how to write. He was almost completely illiterate. So in the first edition of the book, he missed a bunch of punctuation, periods, exclamation marks, question marks, whatnot. So in all previous editions of the book, he would include on the last page or at the bottom just extra punctuation and told you to put it wherever you saw fit. It's just funky and weird is why I have it. It is not a good read, but it's just interesting. I've always been a coin collector, so I've got many albums of coins. This is my penny collection, or part of my penny collection. I've just got lots of these little booklets of coins, including pressed pennies, the ones that you roll through a machine at a zoo or an amusement park or whatever. I've got a copy of the Communist Manifesto. Haven't read it. I think I bought it as a joke. But not as a joke, one of my favorite pieces of literature that I skated my way through high school and college writing papers about is George Orwell's Animal Farm. Kind of funny that it's next to the Communist Manifesto, but even as a children's book, it is a incredibly dense book if you get into just everything about all the symbolism and everything. But I think I wrote 4 or 5 papers even through college based on this book. So this is an interesting one. It is completely blank on all sides, and it was randomly given away to bookstores. And it is about a man's travels. It's a man's story, kind of like Into the Wild. A man did that, and this is his book, but he randomly sent it to bookstores, and I went into a bookstore and they said, hey, I think that you specifically would like this book. And it's a decent read. Next I've got a bunch of the Goosebumps books that I read as a kid, Night of the Living Dummy, The Mask, things like that. Zeus Grant's Stupid Wishes, which is a common speak translation version of a lot of the Greek myths. It's like Zeus goes up to Hera and says, "Hey, what up, babe?" And it's some guy just translating them into common speak and making jokes about the myths themselves and how dumb they are. But just a fun read of mythology. A lot of philosophy, a lot of Nietzsche, a lot of Sartre. None that are even particularly interesting or worth pointing out. If books aren't your speed, I'm also a big comic book fan. They've got pictures, they're easier to read. And we're just going to go through some of them that I've read and enjoyed. My first being Alias. This is the Purple Man saga, specifically what the first season of Jessica Jones was based on Netflix. It is the only time that Jessica Jones is interesting to me, and the only time that Purple Man was ever a good character for me personally. Next we got the classic Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. I think it is a really good story. It started the kind of genre that is a trope today of what if this character but different in the future. But still, just a really good, solid read. It's got Batman fighting Superman and an old Joker. It's, speaking of the Joker, though, Batman Death of the Family, not in the family, of the family from the New 52. This is the one where Joker cuts off his face. It's funky, it's weird. It's got the Joker with no face on for the entire book. Worth checking out. Batman Endgame, which is Batman versus the Justice League, who is being mind controlled by the Joker. So he gets in a mech and, has to fight through each Justice League member, incapacitating them. And it culminates in a fight with him and the Joker, which ends in both of them dying. Batman The Long Halloween, which is one of the best Batman stories ever told. It's also one of my favorite art styles. I love the almost minimalist, high lining and drawing style of this book, and also the story is just fantastic. Next we got The Boys. I only have the first 4 volumes, looking for the other ones. Not going for the omnibuses or the modern releases with the TV show characters on the front, but the original Dynamite releases. But I love this book. This is a great book. Great show as well. Very similar to Invincible, which is more recent than The Boys. But, gosh, this is a messed up book and show. But I would recommend it to anyone. A series that I somehow fell into just loving is the Dark Knight's Metal series. I've got 3 different volumes of it, both death metal, and some of the tie-in issues. Just real fun, real dark, real weird. If you like seeing other versions of Batman, check those out. But those are just a real fun read. Next is the Deadpool Killogy, which is a trilogy, but he kills. First is Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, which is the best Deadpool book ever written, and one of the only good ones. Deadpool Killustrated, which Deadpool kills all of the classic literature characters that inspired comic book characters, and then Deadpool Kills Deadpool, which is arguably not actually part of the duology, but is sometimes included in omnibuses as part of it. And it is Deadpool killing other versions of Deadpool. Evil Ernie, which is the first volume of Evil Ernie, first appearance of Evil Ernie and Lady Death. I really like the character of Evil Ernie. He reminds me a lot of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, who we'll get to in just a second. But just a real weird, dark, twisted character. Tower of Babel, JLA, which is one of the best Justice League and Batman stories. Again, it is Justice League. It is Batman systematically taking down every member of the Justice League, but on accident this time. Somebody hacks into his files, and he has files on how to destroy each member of the Justice League, and somebody takes those and enacts them, and even enacts it on Batman. But just very good book. Kingdom Come, classic Alex Ross illustrated book, one of the prettiest comic books just from a classical art perspective, hyper detailed each page, but just really good story either way. It's one of those what if the future but bad. Next is Preacher, and it's a really good show. I don't love the art style of the book though. The book is ugly to me, but I think that the show does a really good job of taking this concept. So honestly, I would recommend you watch the show before you pick up the comics. I think it just does a better job. Now the boys, both of them are good. Next is the first two volumes of Neil Gaiman's Sandman, one of the best comic books of all time, critically. It's on up there with Watchmen. I think that it is just an incredible world that Neil Gaiman builds. So next we have Superman Emperor Joker, which is the Joker gets the powers of Mr. Mxyzptlk and uses it to terrorize Superman and Batman. Fantastic. I'm noticing I actually loaned out my copy of Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, so briefly go over it. If you watched Invader Zim, it is the same guy who created that. Very dark, twisted tale that delves into the emotions behind depression and things like that. Very dark book, but very good, very emotionally important. And if you like Invader Zim, you'll like that one. Next is the 3 volumes of Umbrella Academy. Fantastic show, fantastic book series. Excited to see what they do in the future with them. Then we got Watchmen, which is the most critically acclaimed comic book of all time. And quite frankly, I agree. It is not my favorite, but it is in my top favorite. Just a Cold War era story that summarizes what it means to be a superhero and why superheroes are kind of lame and why they're bad people generally. And then the last one I got is Flex Mentallo, who is a character from Doom Patrol, where if he flexes one of his muscles in a certain way, it does one thing, but each muscle does a different thing. One can teleport him, one can freeze time, one can give him laser vision, whatever. But this book is almost a time capsule of comics. The first issue is written in the Golden Age style of comics. Second issue is Silver Age, etc. And it is Flex going through the eras of comics, trying to find his place in them, for he has been forgotten by the world. And if a superhero is forgotten, even in the real world, especially in the comic world, what good is that superhero anymore? So it is a metatextual book, first and foremost, but it is also just a really good story, so I'd recommend picking it up. Next, I wanted to go over some of the video games I have. So I'm by no means a gamer, but I do enjoy playing games from time to time. So we're going to start with the Switch games. Animal Crossing, which is the game that I've currently sunk the most hours into. It is just one of those that you can play, 30 minutes a day, but every day. and so much fun. It got me through the quarantine shutdown. It came out almost the same day that we got shut down, and I've just played it ever since. Next is just a little game collection of Monopoly, Risk, and Trivial Pursuit. I only have it for Monopoly for like playing it with the family or friends. Next is Lego DC Supervillains, which is, I love the Lego games. I think it is one of the best video game franchises, almost period. But this one's just real good because it's got all the DC supervillains. And then we got the Harry Potter Lego collection. This one's fine. It's not in my top tier list, but Star Wars is better than this one. DC Superheroes is better than this one, but still a solid Lego game. Next is Marvel Superheroes number 2. I played about an hour of this one, didn't love it. Just something about the controls and the overworld couldn't get into. Next is Luigi's Mansion 3, which is a sequel to my favorite video game of all time, which is Luigi's Mansion for the GameCube. Loved this one. Never played the second one on the DS, but just absolutely loved the first and the third one. Super Mario Party Superstars. Real good party game. You know, have a few beers, have a few laughs with your friends. It's a good one. Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu. It's fine. I got it for cheap. That's the only reason I really have it. Now, Pokemon Snap for the Switch is great. I love the original, and this one only adds to the excitement and the interest of the original. Pokemon Sword, never played it. SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom for the Switch, fine. Nostalgia got me on this one. I was like, I remember playing that as a kid. I'm going to pick it up on the Switch. Either this one's just not good, or I just had more fun with it as a kid. The Super Mario 3D All-Stars collection, which is kind of this cloud looming over me at this point. Still have not beat Mario 64, and to be honest, I don't think I ever will. I just don't like it enough to even try to beat it. It's just not a well-made game. But Super Mario Sunshine, top tier. Now Super Mario Odyssey, wonderful game. Absolutely great game. And Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, another good, just get your friends around, play some Smash Brothers. Next is Dante's Inferno for the PlayStation 3. One of my favorite books, one of my favorite just worlds that Dante Alighieri builds, and this one takes some creative licenses and makes it a fun, kind of spooky horror game. Next is Far Cry 3. Haven't played it, but I've heard great things about it. Next is God of War. I heard great things about it, haven't played it. I played the PlayStation 4 one, and it is in my top 5 games of all time. So I picked up this one, just hadn't gotten around to playing it. And Portal 2, just a fantastic all-around game. Absolute classic and innovative for a lot of reasons. And then Thomas Was Alone, the Steelbook edition. This is the PC Steelbook. This is a very special game for me. It came out in a point in my life where I really needed this game and what it had to say. I recommend you pick it up and play it. Even if you don't play it to completion, I want you to at least experience this game. I think it's beautiful. It made me cry. Endless tears. And movies and games and stuff don't make me cry. But this one just came out at such a specific point in my life where I needed it. It's very important to me. So next I take you over my little shadow box of Game Boy and DS games. Start with Pokemon Gold, which was my first ever video game, I think. My father had Super Mario World, so that was the first game that I played, but Pokemon Gold was my first video game. It was my first Pokemon experience. The first thing I knew about Pokemon was Pokemon Gold. Um, Later picked up Silver. It's the same game, just a different guy on the front. Pokemon Yellow, which is better than the original Red and Blue, but still a shoddy experience. The Pokemon trading card game for Game Boy, which is actually fantastic and taught me how to play the card game, and still to this day is one of my favorite, like, actually challenging games to play. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, Red Rescue Team for the Game Boy Advance is a really good game, another nostalgia game for me. Same with Pokemon Leaf Green. As a kid, I loved to play Pokemon, and this was actually my second Pokemon game that I ever owned. Next we have Advanced Wars Dual Strike, which is a great DS game, a great military strategy type game. And then we got a Game Boy Advance, or a Game Boy Micro, excuse me. Picked that up from a thrift store for cheap, and it looks good in my box. Quickly scan over this top shelf. Most of it's Godzilla. Even got a couple of Godzilla video games mixed in there. This is a box of Pokemon cereal. This is one that I think you can still buy in stores, but I do have the original one. It is just currently at my store. I have the green Dragon Zord from Power Rangers just because he fits really well with Godzilla stuff. Next, we are going to go over some of the single issue comics that I have in my short box. Most of these are alphabetical, but it goes into just kind of a random order towards the end. First of all is Action Comics number 775, the first appearance of the Elite and Manchester Black. In my opinion, it is the single best single issue of comics. If you're going to ever pick up just one comic book, not a graphic novel or anything, it would be this one. It is a incredible read. Next is the All-Star Section 8 miniseries. There's a superhero team called the Section 8. It is a bunch of rejects and losers, but it's a really fun just romp through the DC universe. Next is the Amazing Spider-Man number 12. I think this is the third volume, or fourth volume. But significance is it is the first appearance of Leopardon, which is the giant Super Sentai robot that Spider-Man fights in with the Japanese TV show. Next is Animal Man 26, which is where Neil Gaiman writes himself into this book and becomes a character in the DC universe. This is actually just a single page from an Archie comic, but it is Archie and gang watching Godzilla on television fighting Mothra. It is Godzilla's first ever comic book appearance. This is my favorite cover in all of comics. It is just one of those silly Batman adventures of Batman fighting a colorful monster, but I absolutely love this book. Next is the first appearance of Arkham Hospital. This next run is just a funky little story of, it's called the Zur-En-Ah saga, where Batman puts on a bunch of trash as its costume and thinks that he's fighting aliens, and he's just battling his own mind, basically. So that's that mini-series there. Next is The Killing Joke, one of the most seminal Batman stories, where Barbara Gordon's, gets shot, and Batman is put through trial after trial. Next is one of two issues that were the only issues that Harlan Ellison ever wrote, which was this Daredevil book and this Batman book. But Harlan Ellison is one of my favorite authors of all time, and just those were the only two comics he ever did. This is the first appearance of Animal, Vegetable, or Mineral Man, who can turn into any animal, vegetable, or mineral. And then I've got pretty much all of his first appearances. I think his first 4 appearances I have him. Next is the first appearance of Hate Monger, which is a clone of Hitler who is in the KKK. Absolutely wild concept, but that was right when Marvel Comics was starting to be a thing. In this issue, Black Panther drops his moniker of Black Panther and becomes the Black Jaguar, because at the time the Black Panther had political connotations with riots and things, so they did that to avoid that connotation. In this issue of Fantastic Four, Jack Kirby is depicted as God and literally redraws the Thing, who gets killed, and he redraws him to life. Next is the Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas mini-series by IDW. Real funky art, but it is just the same story as the movie or book. Next is the Great Lakes Adventures, or Great Lakes Avengers, excuse me. And it is, again, just a book of rejected superheroes. And in each issue of this book, one of the main members of the team dies. And it's all taken for jokes and for laughs. Next is the first official appearance of Godzilla in comics, done by Marvel originally. And this book, I just love the cover of Godzilla on that book. I think it's just a really well-drawn picture. This is the first appearance of Section 8, whom we talked about earlier. This is a Pulp Fiction rip-off cover of She-Hulk. This is a just giant monster, cover, but done in the Japanese style. So this book is the first appearance of a character called Snowflame. Snowflame self-identifies as the god of cocaine, and the more cocaine he does, the stronger he gets. But eventually he overdoses and dies. He only appears in this one issue ever. This is the first appearance of the One Above All, which is the Marvel equivalent of God. Just some really cool Spawn covers coming up next. This is my favorite single issue of Spawn. I love the Angel Spawn so much. More cool Spawn issues. Another cool Angel Spawn cover. Now this one was actually done by a friend of mine. His name is Sean Igu. He drew Spawn fighting Godzilla, and it is one of my personal favorite possessions that I have. Next is Max Landis's Superman American Alien, which is a great miniseries if you like Superman. It takes the character in a different take and gives him kind of a really good origin, in my opinion. So in this issue of Superman's girlfriend Lois Lane, she becomes black just because she's like, oh, that'd be weird. What's that like? I'm gonna do that for a day. Very controversial issue. This is called Thanos' Quest, which is the comic version of how Thanos got all of the Infinity Stones, which is nothing like how he got them in the movie. In fact, it involves entirely independent characters that don't appear in the movie yet. This is Timothy Leary comic. If you're not familiar with Timothy Leary is, he was a college professor who drugged all of his students with LSD to see how they would perform on tests in the 60s. And he was one of the forerunners of like psychedelics, but an absolute madman because he would unknowingly drug his students. This one is World's Funnest, which is Bat-Mite versus Mr. Mxyzptlk. It is them fighting through every era of comics, including the Golden Age, including Dark Knight Returns, including even our world, and destroying every world as they go, just in the name of proving who is the better fifth world creature. This is a little known X-Men series called Die by the Sword. I think it's a 6-part series, but it features one of my favorite characters, which is Mad Jim Jaspers. And that's the only reason I have it, is because he's in this series, and it's a pretty good read. Next is just another one of those Dark Knight Metal books that I really liked, but this one is the first appearance of the Chronicler, which is basically the DC Watcher. This is just a really good cover of Legion. I think it depicts its schizophrenia really well. Here is the first appearance of H.R. Pufnstuf in comics. Here's the first appearance of Gunslinger Spawn. This one has real bad water damage, but it was fixed up by my friend Daniel at Valor Comics. These two books are just the most absurd covers. They're modern books, but done in the classic EC style of pre-code horror, and I just think that they're great. Just a cover I really like. This is, in my opinion, one of the most classic Superman covers. Really like that book. And again, one of the most classic Batman covers. And then I've got the Doomsday Clock series, which is Watchmen Part 2. It's not as good as Watchmen, but it's still a real good series. And the last thing I have in the short box is my favorite Incredible Hulk cover, but this is actually a magazine. But just look at that painted art of the original Avengers team carrying off the Hulk frozen in a piece of ice. Next, we're going to go over my vinyl record collection. I don't have many vinyl records anymore. Used to be a massive collector. Now I just have my absolute favorite ones. But this is Arthur Brown, best known for his song Fire, or You Cast a Spell on Me, or I Cast a Spell on You, excuse me, which was used in Hocus Pocus. Captain Beefheart's Trout Mask replica. Each instrument in this album is playing in a different time signature. Absolute chaos, but it creates some of the most interesting music that you'll ever hear. Of course, the Clockwork Orange soundtrack. The Doors' first album. Another Doors album, but this one I just have because I absolutely love the cover on it. It's one of those that you could almost hang up as a poster. Duran Duran's Rio, also containing Hungry Like a Wolf. I can't show this one, but it's The Dwarves Must Die. It's an interesting album cover, look it up. Next is Enya. Love Enya. Full Metal Jacket soundtrack. Got the 2-part Godzilla collection soundtrack. The Gorillaz original album. Demon Days. Plastic Beach, which is my favorite Gorillaz album. Humans. The Now Now. Iron Maiden's Number of the Beast. Jefferson Airplane. This one's got White Rabbit on it. Sound of the Police single. Led Zeppelin's first album. Second album. Third album. Zoso. Houses of the Holy. And, of course, Physical Graffiti. My second favorite band of all time is MGMT. I think that this is an absolutely perfect album, Oracular Spectacular. Their second album isn't so great, but Little Dark Age really comes back around as their third album being just absolutely fantastic. Oliver Tree is one of my favorite modern artists, and this one's signed. Wow, this one's signed. But Alien Boy. And then Ugly is Beautiful, his new one. Over the Garden Wall soundtrack. Wonderful television show if you haven't seen it. It was done by Cartoon Network. It's got Elijah Wood as the main character. All-star cast. Beautiful show. Perfect for the Halloween season. Pearl Jam 10. Pink Floyd's The Wall. Lou Reed, Transformer. Lana Del Rey's Born to Die. LDR's Paradise. This is Meet the Ruddles, which is a parody on the Beatles done by the Monty Python guys. But the Ruddles. Saint Motel. This is kind of a newer album, newer band, but just really solid in the pop genre. Simon and Garfunkel, Greatest Hits. Spooky Sounds to Make You Shiver. Whoa. Little Halloween cover. Now, for as much crap as I give the original Suicide Squad movie, it has a great soundtrack. So, had to have that. System of a Down, Hypnotize. SOAD, Mesmerize. Tiffany's self-titled with I Think We're Alone Now. Toto 4, which has Africa. Tyler, the Creator's Flower Boy. Van Halen, just one of my favorite album covers. The Peanuts soundtrack. Love the Peanuts. Vince Staples. Barry White's Greatest Hits. Winnie the Pooh Storybook. I just thought this was a really cute piece with the old Tigger and Pooh art. And then lastly, Lenny White, Astral Pirates, which is like a cosmic soundtrack, but it's not the soundtrack to anything. It is its own story. Just a really cool experimental rock piece. And I wanted to show off some movies that potentially might be made into Zach's Never Seen, but it is movies that I own but have not yet watched. So we got Old Boy, classic martial arts movie. Hackers, only really got it because of Matthew Lillard. Sleepaway Camp, which I'm very excited about. Frankenstein's Army, which I've heard is a really good like monster movie. The way its monster designs are really unique. The Snyder Cut of Justice League. I've seen the original Justice League, but have not seen this one yet. Repo Men with Jude Law, Hellfest. Here's Pumpkinhead. We'll definitely be watching that at some point. Lady Bird. They Live. Ryan Gosling in Drive. Shockingly, haven't seen that one yet. The Dead Don't Die. I have never seen any of the live-action Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. Don't really care about the more modern animated one, but I got it for the original 3 live-action ones. Hobo with a Shotgun. Big Fish. Hero, Jet Li martial arts movie. And then John Wick chapters 2 and 3. I've only seen the first one of those. And that's all I have for you today. I know this was another long video, guys, but thank you so much for watching. I hope that you muscled through it. Gives you a better idea of kind of my hobbies, what I collect, what I like to do in my free time. I've got a couple of big things going on in my personal life. I'm going to try to make a video explaining what's going on there at some point. Don't expect regular uploads. It's just the holiday season. I got a little bit more free time right now. But until the next time I see you.